In the chronicles of the Great Long Dynasty, there are many legends of brave warriors and wise scholars. This is not one of them. This is the story of Bai Ruomei, a girl whose beauty was surpassed only by her staggering lack of common sense. Born into the secluded Hundred Poison Valley, Ruomei's father was a master toxicologist who treated her like a human greenhouse. By age 18, Ruomei's skin was as fair as jade and as dangerous as a viper's fang. To her, a hug was a biological weapon. To her, a kiss was a death sentence. Ruomei didn't want to be an assassin. She just wanted to see the world and perhaps find a husband with a very, very strong immune system. Unfortunately, the first man she met was Long Yang, the ninth prince and god of war. He was a man of cold steel and sharp intellect until he met Ruomei. Then, he mostly became a man of rashes, swelling, and deep, existential regret. If you crave stories of high-stakes biological chaos, unbreakable, if slightly toxic, bonds, and the ultimate revenge of a woman who knows where every poison is buried, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Welcome to Lotus Tale Studios, where every petal hides a secret and every story blooms with power. The sun was setting over the dusty border town of Liangju, casting long, golden shadows over the military encampment. Inside the main tent, Long Yang sat hunched over a map of the Northern Territories. He was a man who exuded authority. His brows were like swords, and his eyes were like cold pools of ink. At 24, he was already the Empire's most feared commander. General, his lieutenant, Feng, whispered. You haven't eaten in 2 days. The peace negotiations with the northern tribes begin at dawn. You must maintain your strength. Long Yang sighed, rubbing his temples. Food is a distraction. But fine. Bring me something light. No spices, no flair. Just nourishment. Outside the tent, fate was conspiring against him in the form of a girl wearing a light pink hanfu and carrying a basket of weeds. Bai Ruomei was lost. Again. She had been trying to find the local apothecary to sell her ghost fire peppers, rare chilies that grew in volcanic soil and could induce temporary paralysis if touched with bare skin. Naturally, Ruomei was eating one like a snack, her tongue tingling with delight. Oh, a big tent. Ruomei chirped, her eyes widening. Surely the head chef of this village lives here. I shall trade my peppers for a map. She skipped toward the back of the tent, where a large iron pot of broth was simmering over a small fire. The soldiers nearby were distracted by a gambling match, and Ruomei, moving with the grace of a butterfly and the spatial awareness of a blind bat, tripped over a tent peg. Splash! The entire basket of ghost fire peppers, 36 of the world's most potent neurotoxins, tumbled directly into the general's dinner. Oopsie, Ruomei whispered, her finger on her lip. Well, peppers make soup better. My father always said a little spice clears the mind. Or was it clears the room? No matter. She reached into the boiling pot with her bare hand, completely immune to the heat and poison, to fish out her basket. As she did, her sleeve dipped into the broth, infusing it with the fragrance of the thousand sorrows, a pollen she had spilled on herself earlier that morning which acted as a powerful sedative. Just as she finished cleaning the soup, Feng walked in to fetch the bowl. Ruomei dove under a stack of crates, her heart thumping. Long Yang took the bowl. He took a sip. He paused. Feng, Long Yang said, his voice sounding strangely hollow. Is the soup vibrating? Vibrating, General? My tongue, Long Yang whispered, his eyes beginning to water. I can no longer feel my tongue. In fact, I can no longer feel my teeth. Feng, why are there 4 of you? General. Your face. Long Yang looked into his bronze mirror. His legendary, handsome face, the face that had made noble ladies faint from desire, was currently swelling like a yeast bun in a steamer. His lips, once thin and firm, were now 2 large, red sausages. I have been poisoned, Long Yang tried to say, but his tongue was so swollen he sounded like a drowning duck. At that exact moment, the northern envoy entered the tent for a preliminary greeting. The envoy, a mountain of a man with a fierce beard, stared at the god of war. Is this the man we are to fear? The envoy roared with laughter. He looks like he fought a beehive and lost. Is this a joke, Great Long Dynasty? Do you mock us with this? Fishface Prince. Long Yang tried to stand, but the sedative in the soup kicked in. His knees turned to jelly. He lunged forward, trying to grab his sword to defend his honor, but instead, he tumbled forward, his sausage lips accidentally landing squarely on the northern envoy's cheek. The envoy froze. The guards froze. Under the crates, Ruomei poked her head out and squealed. "Oh." An emotional tribulation. "They are kissing." "He insulted me," the envoy screamed, turning purple. "The prince kissed me to humiliate my ancestors. This is war. War." Long Yang fell into a deep, drug-induced coma right as the envoy stormed out. The next morning, Long Yang woke up to the sound of war horns. His face was still slightly puffy, and his voice was a high-pitched rasp. He had lost the peace treaty, his reputation was in tatters, and he was being recalled to the capital in disgrace. "Find the chef," Long Yang hissed, his eyes burning with a cold, murderous fury. "I want the person who made that soup. I will not rest until they suffer 1,000 deaths." "General," Feng said, trembling. "We found a girl hiding in the grain stores. She says her name is Ruomei and she was just trying to help you spice up your life. Long Yang walked out of his tent to see a girl tied up, loosely, because she kept wiggling out, in the center of the camp. She looked at him with huge, innocent eyes, a smudge of soot on her nose. "Hello, Sausage Prince," she waved. "Do you want more soup? I found some mushrooms in the forest. They have blue spots, which means they're happy mushrooms." Long Yang stared at her. He had faced 10,000 charging cavalrymen without blinking. But looking at this girl, who was currently trying to eat the rope she was tied with, he felt a genuine shiver of fear. "You," he rasped, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You killed my career. You destroyed a decade of diplomacy. I should execute you right here." Ruomei pouted, her eyes filling with tears. "But you looked so hungry. And your lips are so much bigger now. It makes you look generous. My father says big lips mean a big heart. My father says big lips mean an allergic reaction to idiocy." Long Yang roared. "Feng. We are going back to the capital. Since I have no army to lead anymore, I have plenty of time for revenge. Tie her to the back of my horse. She is coming with us." "To the dungeon, General?" Feng asked. "No," Long Yang said, a dark, twisted smile forming on his face. "I am going to make her my personal tea servant. I want to watch her every move. I want her to feel the weight of my misery. And if she tries to cook anything, I want her tackled to the ground immediately." Ruomei's face lit up. "A job? In the capital? Oh, Sausage Prince, you are so kind. I've always wanted to see the Emperor's palace. I heard they have a lot of gold. Is gold edible? I've been meaning to try it." Long Yang didn't answer. He simply climbed onto his horse and began the long trek back to the capital. He didn't know it yet, but his revenge was the biggest mistake of his life. Because while Long Yang was planning to torture Ruomei with chores, Ruomei was already planning how to help him regain his status. And in Ruomei's world, help was just another word for complete and utter catastrophe. As they rode through the gates of the capital weeks later, the crowds gathered to see the returning hero. Instead, they saw a general with a suspiciously red face and a girl trailing behind him, trying to feed his horse a handful of stinging nettles because she thought the horse looked tired. The gossip started instantly. "Did you see? The 9th prince brought back a girl. She must be a secret weapon. No, look at her eyes. She's clearly a fox spirit who has bewitched him." Long Yang ignored them all, his jaw set. He reached the gates of his manor and turned to Ruomei. "Welcome to your new home, Bai Ruomei. Here, you will learn the meaning of discipline. You will not touch the plants. You will not touch the stove. And most importantly, you will stay 10 feet away from me at all times." Ruomei nodded vigorously, then immediately tripped over her own hem and fell into his arms. The moment her skin brushed his neck, Long Yang felt a familiar tingle. His throat began to itch. "Ruomei," he choked out. "Yes, master," she beamed, her face inches from his. "Get off." But it was too late. Long Yang's grandfather, the old emperor, had just pulled up in his imperial carriage to welcome his grandson home. He stepped out and saw Long Yang holding a beautiful girl in a light pink dress, his face turning a dark, bruised purple from the proximity to her poisonous skin. The emperor's eyes twinkled. Ah, Yanga, I see you didn't bring back a victory, but you brought back a granddaughter-in-law. And you're already so passionate you can't breathe. Wonderful. Long Yang tried to protest, but he could only make a wheezing sound. Ruomei looked at the emperor and gave a clumsy bow. Hello, grandfather. I'm Ruomei. I'm good at soup. Long Yang fainted. The imperial capital was a nest of vipers, but even the most cunning court officials were unprepared for the arrival of Bai Ruomei. Following the emperor's misunderstanding at the manor gates, where he had mistaken Long Yang's allergic suffocation for a passionate embrace, the 9th prince had spent 3 days in the infirmary. He lay there with a cold compress over his eyes and a deep sense of existential doom. General, his lieutenant, Feng, whispered, standing at a very safe distance near the door. The emperor has invited you and the future consort to the mid-autumn banquet tonight. He says it is time the court meets the woman who has stolen your breath away. His Majesty sounds disturbingly enthusiastic. Long Yang groaned, pulling the silk blanket over his head. I wasn't breathless from love, Feng. I was breathless from a closed airway. My neck still looks like a map of the Red Clay Mountains. If I go to that banquet with her, I'll be the first prince in history to be buried in a wedding robe before the ceremony even starts. Be that as it may, sir, Feng countered, if you don't show up, the emperor will think you are hiding her because she is a spy. Or worse. Feng paused, lowering his voice. The whispers are already starting. People are saying the Iron Prince has become Paper Prince because he's hiding from a girl who likes flowers. Long Yang bolted upright, the cold compress falling into his lap. Paper Prince. I have conquered the northern steppes. I have stared down charging cavalry without blinking. I will not be defeated by a girl who tries to eat decorative koi fish because she thinks they are giant orange crackers. He paused, scratching a lingering hive on his wrist. Wait. Did the itching stop sooner than yesterday? Feng leaned in, squinting. Actually, General, the redness is fading faster. Usually, after a Ruomei incident, you're purple for a week. Today, you're merely a light sunset pink. Long Yang stared at his hand. It was true. His body was begrudgingly building a fortress against the chaos. Fine. Prepare the carriage. And tell the guards to bring the vinegar spray. Lots of it. Meanwhile, in the servants' quarters, Ruomei was having the time of her life. She had been given a set of appropriate crimson silk robes, but she found the long, flowing sleeves incredibly inefficient for a girl who liked to keep her hands busy. How do people do anything in these, she wondered, using her silk sash to tie back her hair into 2 messy buns. And this face powder the palace sent, it's so bland. It's like putting flour on a peach. It needs a little kick. She reached into her secret pouch, the one Long Yang had strictly forbidden her from opening, and pulled out a vial of cinnabar glow. In the Poison Valley, this powder was made from crushed iridescent beetles and a rare mountain fungus. It was traditionally used to ward off predators by making the skin glow a faint, warning red. Ruomei, however, just thought it looked like a very vibrant, high-end blush. By the time Long Yang came to fetch her, Ruomei's cheeks were glowing with a supernatural, pulsating radiance that seemed to hum in the dim light of the hallway. Long Yang stopped in his tracks, his hand instinctively going to his throat. Why are you shimmering, Ruomei? Are you about to explode? It's the glow of health, master. Ruomei chirped, skipping toward him. She stopped exactly 10 feet away, respecting the chalk line he had drawn earlier. I also made you a gift for the banquet. Since you're still a bit puffy, I made you a special anti-swelling herbal patch. It's very sticky. She held up a wet, green leaf that smelled like peppermint and old gym shoes. Keep that thing away from me, Long Yang hissed, though he noticed his nose didn't immediately start running at the sight of her. Progress. We are going to the palace. You are to sit, you are to smile, and you are to keep your hands tucked into your sleeves. Do not speak. Do not eat anything that isn't served to everyone else. And for the love of the ancestors, do not call me Sausage Prince in the presence of the Son of Heaven. Long Yang's eye twitched as he said the name. He loathed it, yet as they walked to the carriage, he found himself checking his pulse. He was terrified, yes, but for the first time in years, he wasn't bored. The imperial banquet hall was a sea of gold, jade, and whispering nobles. At the head of the hall sat the old emperor, looking delighted, and beside him sat Su Lian, the minister's daughter. Su Lian had once been engaged to Long Yang before she framed him for the loss of imperial silk to cover her own gambling debts. Seeing Long Yang enter with a girl who looked like a glowing peach made her blood boil with envy. "Ninth prince," Su Lian said, her voice like honeyed hemlock as the couple sat down. "Is this the treasure you found at the border? She certainly has a unique complexion. Is she ill, or is she simply overexcited?" Long Yang sat down, stiff as a mountain. "She is a healer's daughter, Lady Su. Her skin is sensitive to the artificial atmosphere of the city." "Oh," Ruomei interjected, forgetting the no-speaking rule within the first 30 seconds. "It's not the city, it's beetle dust. Do you want some, big sister? You look a bit pale, like a steamed bun that stayed in the pot until it got soggy." The hall went silent. A eunuch dropped a tray of silver cups. Su Lian's fan snapped loudly in her hand, her face turning a shade of white that actually did resemble a soggy bun. The emperor let out a booming laugh that echoed off the rafters. "A candid girl. I like her. Honesty is a rare spice in this court. Now, let the feast begin. Bring out the dragon phoenix soup." As the servants brought out the steaming bowls, Ruomei's nose twitched. She had been raised in a valley where tasty usually meant deadly, and her senses were sharper than a hawk's. She leaned over toward Long Yang's bowl, her glowing face coming dangerously close to his shoulder. "Master," she whispered loudly enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "Don't eat that. The mushrooms are giggling gills. If you eat them, you'll start laughing until your ribs crack and you start dancing on the table. It's a very common prank back home when we want to distract the village elders." Long Yang looked at the soup. He looked at Su Lian, who was watching him with a smug, expectant smirk. He realized then that Su Lian must have bribed the kitchen to humiliate him in front of his grandfather. If he started laughing hysterically now, his military career would be finished. "Ruomei," Long Yang whispered, his voice low and urgent. Can you fix it without making the building collapse?" "Of course." Ruomei beamed. She reached into her sleeve and pulled out a handful of silver-tongue moss. Before Long Yang could grab her arm, she didn't just put it in his bowl, she stood up, skipped to the giant serving tureen in the center of the hall, and dumped the whole bag in with a flourish. "Sharing is caring," she announced to the emperor and the shocked ministers. "Ruomei, no." Long Yang gasped, grabbing his head in his hands. Silver-tongue moss was indeed an antidote to the giggling gills, but it had a secondary, much more chaotic property. It was a potent truth serum mixed with a mild skin irritant. In the Poison Valley, they used it to settle legal disputes. In the imperial court, it was a weapon of mass destruction. Within 10 minutes, the banquet hall turned into a scene of absolute madness. The Minister of Finance stood up, his face turning bright red as he scratched his arms. "I have been stealing from the national granary to pay for my wife's collection of rare porcelain cats," he screamed, looking horrified by his own words. The head eunuch began to sob into his wine. "I don't actually like the emperor's poetry. It rhymes too much and makes my head hurt." And Su Lian, scratching her neck furiously as the moss reacted to her lies, pointed a shaking finger at the emperor. "Your crown looks like a deformed golden pineapple, and I only wanted to marry Long Yang so I could be the one to slap him every time he acted noble." The emperor, who had only taken a tiny sip, sat frozen in shock. He looked at the chaos, the nobles scratching their bodies and screaming their darkest secrets, and then he looked at Ruomei. Ruomei was happily gnawing on a chicken leg, the only person in the room who wasn't itching or confessing. She looked up at the emperor and smiled. "See, grandfather? They're just being honest. The moss makes the skin tickle if you have lies in your heart. It's a great way to make friend." Long Yang looked at Su Lian, who was currently trying to use a soup spoon to scratch her back while admitting she had once poisoned the Empress's favorite goldfish out of spite. For the first time in years, Long Yang wasn't the one being humiliated. He felt a strange, bubbling sensation in his chest. It wasn't an allergic reaction, it was a laugh. "You," Long Yang whispered, leaning toward Ruomei. You just dismantled the entire political infrastructure of the capital in one soup course. I told you, Sausage Prince. I'm here to help." She turned to him, her glowing red cheeks beaming with pride. Long Yang grabbed her hand. He didn't use the vinegar spray. He didn't reach for his gloves. He just held it. His palm tingled, and a small rash began to form, but it didn't hurt. He was winning. "Let's go," Long Yang said, pulling her out of the hall just as the Minister of War began to confess his secret passion for embroidery. Once they were in the moonlit garden, Long Yang looked at Ruomei. "Su Lian is finished. The Emperor heard everything. The censors are recording her words as we speak. By tomorrow, she'll be lucky if she's allowed to scrub floors." "Is that bad?" Ruomei asked, tilting her head. "No, Ruomei," Long Yang said, his voice surprisingly soft. "It's justice. Though, I suspect the laundry will never be the same." He looked at her, his face beginning to swell just a tiny bit from the physical contact. "You are a walking natural disaster. But I think I'm starting to get used to the sausage life." Ruomei giggled and poked his slightly puffy cheek. "I knew you'd like it, Master." Long Yang sighed, looking up at the moon. He was disgraced, his family was a mess, and his face was itchy. But as Ruomei skipped ahead of him, glowing like a misplaced star, he realized he had never felt more alive. The military manor of the Ninth Prince had always been a place of iron discipline, sharp steel, and silence so heavy it could stifle a sneeze. However, in the week following the imperial banquet, that silence had been replaced by the sound of bubbling pots, accidental explosions, and the frequent, panicked shouting of Lieutenant Feng. Long Yang sat in his study, staring at his reflection in a polished bronze mirror. He was conducting his daily Ruomei audit. "Feng," Long Yang said, tilting his chin. "Look at this patch on my neck. I touched the hem of Ruomei's dress this morning when she tripped over the threshold. Usually, my throat would have felt like it was being squeezed by a mountain troll. Today, it just feels like a mild sunburn." Feng leaned in, squinting at the prince's skin. "It's true, General. The swelling is minimal. It seems your Ruomei resistance is growing. At this rate, by the time the wedding arrives, you might actually be able to stand within 3 feet of her without needing a priest to read your last rites." Long Yang set the mirror down, a complicated expression on his face. He was the god of war, a man who had survived poison arrows and sub-zero winters, yet his greatest tactical victory was successfully building an immunity to his own fiancée. "It's a strange feeling, Feng. I spent my life fearing the invisible strike. Now, I'm voluntarily becoming a human pincushion just so I can have breakfast with a girl who thinks vinegar is a fruit juice." "Speaking of Miss Ruomei, sir," Feng said, his voice dropping an octave, "she is currently at the archery range. She said the soldiers looked spiritually dehydrated and needed a snack to help them see the truth of the arrow dot." Long Yang bolted from his chair, his cape billowing behind him. "Spiritually dehydrated? No. Not the snacks. Anything but the snacks." At the archery range, 50 of the Empire's finest marksmen, men who could hit a fly's wing from 100 paces, were standing in a ragged line. They looked deeply confused. In front of them stood Bai Ruomei, wearing a light blue hanfu and holding a wooden tray filled with vibrant, glowing neon blue berries. "Eat up, brave warriors," Ruomei chirped, her hair tied back with medicinal vines that occasionally twitched. "These are sunrise berries. My father found them in the caves of the north. They sharpen the vision until you can see the breadth of a mountain. Also, they taste like honey and a little bit like lightning." The soldiers, charmed by her bright smile and intimidated by her status as the future consort, didn't hesitate. They had survived the Great Hunger of 22, surely a few blueberries wouldn't hurt. They popped them into their mouths. "Wait." Long Yang's voice thundered across the field. He skidded to a halt, his boots kicking up dust. "Do not swallow." 50 Adam's apples bobbed in perfect unison. Gulp. Long Yang reached them, gasping for breath. He looked at Ruomei, who was beaming with pride, and then at his men, whose eyes were already beginning to dilate. "Ruomei," Long Yang rasped, "tell me exactly what those berries do. And don't give me the healer's version. Give me the don't want to die version." "Oh, Sausage Prince. You're so dramatic," she said, poking his arm. Long Yang didn't flinch, even as a tiny red dot appeared where she touched him. "The berries just remove the fog from the eyes. My father used them to hunt for rare herbs in the dark. The only tiny side effect is that sometimes you see, well, everything. All at once. Suddenly, Captain Zhao, a burly veteran with 3 scars across his face, let out a high-pitched, melodic giggle. He pulled back his bowstring, but his hands were vibrating with a manic energy. General. Zhao squealed, his eyes glowing a faint, neon blue. I can see the wind. It looks like a giant, invisible silk ribbon, and I can see the ants on the target. They're having a meeting. They look very organized. Captain Zhao, put the bow down, Long Yang commanded. I can't. Zhao laughed. The arrow wants to be free. It wants to join the ants. He released the string. Usually, Zhao's arrows were like lightning strikes. This one went directly into the sky, performed a graceful loop, and landed in the general's favorite koi pond, narrowly missing a golden fish. Fire! Ruomei shouted, trying to encourage the men. 50 archers released their arrows. It was a disaster of legendary proportions. Because their vision was too sharp, the soldiers were trying to aim at things that didn't exist in the physical realm. They were aiming at auras, at dust motes, and, in one soldier's case, at the spirit of his deceased grandmother whom he claimed was hovering over the target. Arrows rained down on the laundry lines, the roof of the barracks, and the decorative topiary. One arrow pinned Feng's official silk hat to a wooden post, missing his ear by a hair's breadth. They're dancing. Ruomei clapped her hands, her cinnabar glow blush shimmering in the sunlight. The arrows are following the music of the universe. There is no music. Long Yang roared, ducking as a stray arrow whistled past. They are hallucinating. Zhao, why are you flapping your arms? I am a blue heron. Zhao shouted, dropping his bow and leaping onto a stone wall. The sky is calling me, General. I must go to the marshes. Within minutes, 50 elite scouts were rolling on the grass, flapping their arms, or trying to have deep, philosophical conversations with their own shadow. Long Yang marched over to Ruomei and grabbed her by the shoulders. He didn't even think about the 10-foot rule. He didn't reach for his vinegar spray. He just held her, his fingers digging into the silk of her sleeves. Bai Ruomei, you have turned my elite strike force into a flock of poultry. Do you realize the paperwork this will require? Ruomei looked up at him, her bottom lip trembling. I just wanted them to hit the target, Master. They always look so mean when they shoot. I thought if they saw the oneness of the world, they'd be better archers. You hit a target with physics and discipline, not oneness. Long Yang looked down at his hands. He was touching her bare neck now. He waited for the explosion. He waited for the hives. The hives came, but they were small. They didn't burn. They didn't swell. He stared at his own skin, fascinated. I'm standing right here. I'm holding you. And I can still breathe. Ruomei's eyes widened. Oh, you're getting stronger, Sausage Prince. Your skin is becoming very brave. My skin is becoming numb out of self-preservation, Long Yang corrected her, though he didn't let go. Wait. I have the antidote for the men. Ruomei reached into her pouch and pulled out a small spray bottle. It's made of fermented toad lily juice and mountain vinegar. It smells like a wet dog's ear, but it snaps the brain back into the boring world instantly. She began spraying the air. The mist hit Long Yang square in the face. The scent was staggering. It was a combination of rotting fish, old socks, and swamp gas. Long Yang gagged, his eyes watering, but miraculously, the blue glow in the soldier's eyes vanished instantly. My head, Zhao groaned, falling off the wall. Why am I a heron? Why do I smell like a swamp? To the showers. Long Yang croaked, wiping toad juice from his eyes. All of you. And if I see a blue berry within 5 miles of this manor, I will have it executed by beheading. Later that evening, the manor was quiet again, though the scent of toad lily lingered in the curtains. Long Yang sat in his study, reading a report from the palace. Feng, Long Yang said, what is the news regarding Su Lian? As you predicted, General. The imperial censors recorded every word of her confession at the banquet. Her father, the minister, tried to claim she was temporarily possessed, but the emperor was not amused. Her noble rank has been officially stripped. She is now a commoner of the 4th class. The whispers say she is currently hiding in her family's secondary estate, but she has been ordered to report for community labor by the next moon. Long Yang nodded. Good. She spent her life looking down on others. Let her see what the world looks like from the bottom. A soft knock came at the door. Ruomei poked her head in, looking uncharacteristically shy. She was holding a small wooden box. Master, are you still stinky from the toad juice? I have bathed 3 times, Ruomei. I still smell like a wet dog, but at least I no longer smell like a rotten wet dog. She walked over, crossing the chalk line without thinking, and set the box on his desk. I brought you a peace offering. It's an apple. A real one. I didn't touch it with my skin. I used silver tongs. And I didn't put any berries near it. Long Yang looked at the apple. He looked at Ruomei. He reached out, took her hand, and pulled her closer. He waited for the reaction. A tiny itch. A small red mark. That was all. You really are a disaster, he whispered, his voice sounding tired but not angry. But I'm your disaster, she chirped, leaning her head on his shoulder. Long Yang closed his eyes. He realized that the Iron Prince was slowly becoming a Ruomei prince. He was still the god of war, but now, his greatest battle was no longer against the northern tribes. It was against his own heart and the constant threat of accidentally becoming a blue heron. Ruomei, he said, taking a bite of the apple. Tomorrow, no snacks. No berries. Just silence. Okay, master. But I did find some glow-in-the-dark slime in the cellar. Go to sleep, Ruomei. As she skipped away, laughing, Long Yang looked at the hives on his hand. They were already fading. He smiled, a genuine, sharp smile. He was ready for the next catastrophe. The library of the Ninth Prince was a sanctuary of ancient scrolls, rare cartography, and silence. Or, at least, it had been until Bai Ruomei decided that the darkness between the mahogany shelves was supremely depressing. Long Yang arrived at the library doors exactly 2 minutes too late. He found the grand hall bathed in an eerie, pulsating neon green light that flickered like the heartbeat of a giant, radioactive firefly. The smell of ozone and damp earth hung in the air, a sure sign that Ruomei had been cleaning. Ruomei, Long Yang whispered, his voice trembling with the effort not to roar. What have you done to the history of our ancestors? The annals of the Great Long Dynasty look like they're about to achieve sentience and fly away. Ruomei turned around, her face smeared with a thick, glowing sludge that made her look like a forest spirit caught in a landslide. Master, you're just in time. I noticed you often study late at night, and candles are so expensive. Plus, they give you those tiny wrinkles between your eyebrows. So, I harvested some luminous cave snail slime. I've applied it to the spines of all the books. Now you can find the tactical treatises of General Wei even during a total eclipse. Long Yang walked toward a shelf and touched a scroll. His hand immediately stuck to it with the tenacity of a hungry leech. When he pulled away, a long, glowing string of green goo connected his palm to the literature. It's a bit tactile, Ruomei admitted, wringing her slime-covered hands. But it's very efficient. And look, I even used it to highlight the important parts of your personal tactical journals. I thought the green was very strategic. Long Yang opened his private journal. Every mention of enemy flank, supply line, or prince's honor had been smeared with a thick layer of green sludge. Ruomei, Long Yang said, closing his eyes to find the center of calm that was rapidly being replaced by green slime. This slime, tell me the truth. Does it have any other properties? Besides being a sticky, glowing nightmare that has ruined my life's work. Oh, only a tiny one, she chirped, stepping into his personal space. Long Yang noticed that his skin didn't even prickle. His immunity was now so advanced that he could practically bathe in her presence, which was fortunate, considering the current environment. It's a vocal catalyst. In the deep caves, the snails use it to echo their mating calls through the stone. If you get it on your skin, it makes you say whatever is at the very front of your mind. It's like a thought leak. My father says it's the best way to find out if a boy really likes you or just your dowry. Long Yang froze. He looked at his hand, which was covered in the glowing catalyst. He looked at Ruomei, whose face was literally radiating honesty. Thought leak, he asked, his voice cracking. Yes. For example, Ruomei said, her own face glowing brighter as the chemical reaction intensified. "Right now I am thinking that your ears are very cute when you're angry, like a little mountain cat that lost its favorite rock and wants to hiss at the sun." Ruomei's eyes widened to the size of tea saucers. She slapped a slime-covered hand over her mouth. "Oh, the slime. I didn't mean to say that out loud. I mean, I did think it, but I didn't mean to share it with the sausage prince." Long Yang felt a sudden, terrifying pressure in his chest. A fountain of words was bubbling up from his stomach, bypassing his brain's filter entirely. He tried to swallow them, but the snail slime was a cruel master. "I actually find your complete lack of common sense strangely refreshing because everyone else in this palace is a lying snake who wants my throne or my head," Long Yang bellowed. He gasped, covering his own mouth. "Ruomei, what is happening? Why am I shouting?" "The catalyst," she squeaked, her voice rising in pitch. "We have to wash it off." "But wait, I used the ever-dry resin to seal the slime so it wouldn't evaporate. Water won't touch it. We need the solvent, but I left it in my room. I am worried that if you leave this manor I will go back to being a miserable, bored statue who only cares about border patrols." Long Yang bellowed at the top of his lungs. He looked horrified. "Stop. Mouth, stop. I am a prince. I have dignity." Ruomei's face turned a shade of pink that rivaled the neon green of the library. "Master, you think I'm fun? I think you are a walking natural disaster, but I have spent more time laughing at your stupidity than I have spent thinking about my disgrace at the border." Long Yang was practically screaming now, his face inches from hers. The thought leak was a torrent now. The slime on their hands met as he grabbed her wrists to steady himself. The glow intensified until the library looked like the heart of a star. "I am the Sausage Prince," Long Yang roared, finally surrendering to the nickname. "I am the Sausage Prince, and I realize now that being a sausage is better than being a lonely, cold piece of iron. Your skin smells like peaches and danger, and I want to protect the world from you, but I want to protect you from the world even more." Ruomei looked up at him, her heart thumping against her ribs. Under the influence of the snail slime, she couldn't hide her own front-of-mind thoughts anymore. "I only poisoned you the first time because I thought you were the most beautiful man I'd ever seen, and I wanted to see if your skin was as soft as it looked," she yelled back. "It is. Your skin is very high quality." Long Yang started to laugh. It wasn't his usual cold, princely chuckle. It was a deep, belly-shaking laugh that echoed off the glowing scrolls. The honesty was overwhelming. The air in the library felt thick with secrets that were no longer secrets. "We are a mess," he said, the slime making the truth flow easily but the volume finally lowering to a normal shout. "I am a disgraced general and you are a ditzy girl from a valley of vipers." "We're a team," Ruomei corrected him. "The Sausage Prince and the Jelly Brain. We're going to be legendary." Suddenly, the library doors swung open with a dramatic bang. Su Leian, who had been ordered to report for her first day of community labor, stood there. She had bribed a guard to let her retrieve a personal item, hoping to catch Long Yang in a moment of impropriety to regain her leverage. She was dressed in the drab grey robes of a fourth-class commoner, her face twisted in a sneer. What she saw was a neon green room and two people covered in sludge, shouting compliments and confessions at each other. "General," Su Leian gasped, her voice shrill. "What is the meaning of this glowing debauchery? Is this how a prince behaves? Covered in filth with a common weed gatherer?" Long Yang turned to her. He didn't even try to hide his glowing hands. The last of the snail slime gave him one final, brutal thought leak. "I think your face looks like a deflated kickball and I regret every second I spent engaged to a woman whose soul is as dry as overcooked rice." Long Yang roared at Su Leian. "And I am glad you are a commoner now because at least the laundry will finally be clean." Su Lian's jaw dropped so far it nearly hit her chest. The Imperial censors, who had been following her to ensure she completed her labor, began scribbling furiously in their ledgers. "And I think," Ruomei added, stepping forward with glowing confidence, "that you smell like fake jasmine and envy. Also, your left eyebrow is drawn on at a 45-degree angle and it makes you look like a confused pigeon." Su Leian let out a shriek of pure, unadulterated rage and fled the library, followed by the confused but highly entertained censors. This would be the final nail in her social coffin. By dinner time, the entire capital would know she had been truth-bombed by a glowing general. Long Yang looked at Ruomei. The leek was starting to fade as the slime dried into a hard, non-reactive shell. He felt a strange sense of peace, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his chest. "Well," Long Yang rasped, his voice tired from all the shouting. "I suppose that settles the dignity issue once and for all. I am officially the sausage prince of the Long Dynasty." "Master," Ruomei whispered, looking at their joined, glowing hands. "Does the slime mean we have to get married now? Because we shared our innermost truths and I told you your skin was high quality." Long Yang looked at her. He thought about the hives that were no longer appearing. He thought about the blue herons, the itchy banquet, and the glowing scrolls. He realized that despite the chaos, the smells, and the constant threat of accidental death, he hadn't felt this alive in years. "Ruomei," he said, his voice firm and sincere. "I think if I marry anyone else, they would die of shock or boredom within a week. Only you can survive me, and apparently, only I am stubborn enough and now immune enough to survive you." "Is that a proposal?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "I think it is," Long Yang shouted, the last bit of the snail slime giving him one final, thunderous push. "Now let's go find that solvent before I accidentally tell my grandfather that his grandchildren are all idiot." Ruomei cheered and tried to hug him, but they both realized they were still stuck together by the ever-dry resin. "We're a permanent team," she laughed. "Phone." Long Yang yelled toward the door. "Bring the solvent. And a large brush. I have some history books to UN glow." As they waited, stuck together in the neon light, Long Yang realized that his life was no longer a military campaign. It was a comedy of errors, and for the first time, he was happy to be the leading man. The announcement of the 9th prince's marriage to the jellyfish of the 100 Poison Valley sent the imperial capital into a state of high-level emergency. While the commoners cheered for what they believed was a true love story that transcended racial and biological boundaries, the imperial physicians were busy hoarding calamine lotion and smelling salts as if preparing for a siege. Long Yang, now fully accepting his fate as a man destined for a life of tactical biological warfare, took charge of the wedding preparations with the same ruthless intensity he had used to plan the siege of Helan Pass. "Feng," Long Yang commanded, pointing a charcoal stick at a complex blueprint of the wedding altar. "I want a moat." A 3-foot-wide moat filled with specialized vinegar water surrounding the bride and groom. "My research shows it neutralizes approximately 40% of Ruomei's airborne skin toxins." "Understood, General," Feng replied, scribbling notes while wearing a protective mask. "And the seating arrangements for the guests? Seat them at least 50 paces back. Provide every attendee with a silk veil treated with triple-layer charcoal filters. If Ruomei sneezes during the vows, I do not want to lose the entire Ministry of Rites in a single afternoon. We already have enough vacancies after the library incident." Long Yang paused, looking at his hands. He had been spending 3 hours a day sitting in a room filled with Ruomei's favorite scented candles just to harden his constitution. His Ruomei resistance was now a marvel of medical science. He could withstand a direct hug for up to 10 minutes before his eyes started to water. He was no longer just the god of war, he was the god of antihistamines. In the bridal chamber, Ruomei was vibrating with an energy that was both adorable and terrifying. She was surrounded by 6 brave sempstresses who were wearing thick leather gloves, beeswax-coated masks, and goggles usually reserved for ironworkers. "Oh, the red silk is so pretty," Ruomei chirped, her fingers twitching with the urge to touch the delicate fabric. "Don't touch, miss," the head sempstress squeaked, performing a frantic mid-air dodge that would have impressed a martial arts master. "We've already treated the hem with ever-pure salt so the silk won't dissolve or catch fire if you get too excited." Ruomei pouted, her cinnabar glow blush shimmering with her fluctuating emotions. "I'm not that dangerous. I even made a special fragrance for the ceremony. I call it Eternal Devotion. It's made from fermented orchids, crushed moonstones, and a tiny, tiny bit of sweat from a mountain goat." The sempstresses froze. The silence in the room was heavy with the collective memory of the blue heron incident. "Miss," the head sempstress said, her voice muffled and desperate behind her mask, "for the sake of the empire, for the sake of the laundry, and for the sake of your husband's remaining dignity, please keep the goatsweat fragrance in the lead-lined bottle. The wedding day arrived under a sky as clear and blue as a mountain lake. The Imperial Plaza was packed with nobles who looked more like they were attending a high-stakes quarantine than a celebration. Every guest was draped in protective charcoal veils, and the air in the plaza smelled strongly of white vinegar and medicinal herbs, creating an atmosphere that was less romantic garden and more surgical theater. Long Yang stood at the altar, looking magnificent in his crimson imperial robes. He wore a high, reinforced collar designed to protect his neck and a pair of thin, translucent gloves made from the bladder of a deep-sea fish, a material completely impermeable to Ruomei's peach blossom toxins. The music flared, a chorus of war drums and flutes. Ruomei appeared, walking down the aisle with a grace that was occasionally interrupted by her tripping over her own salt-treated hem. She looked like a dream, a chaotic, shimmering dream. Her veil was embroidered with silver threads, and she was carrying a bouquet of flowers that made the imperial physicians in the audience audibly gasp. Ruomei, Long Yang whispered through his teeth as she reached the vinegar moat. Are those sleeping dragon lilies? They're for the atmosphere, sausage prince, she whispered back, her eyes twinkling behind her veil. I thought the wedding was a bit too tense. These lilies release a puff of pollen every time I shake them. It makes people feel, relax. Ruomei, that pollen is a powerful anesthetic. The priest is already swaying like a willow in a hurricane. Indeed, the imperial priest, an elderly man who had stubbornly refused to wear a charcoal mask because he thought it insulted the gods, was currently leaning heavily against the altar, a glassy, vacant smile plastered across his face. Do you, ninth prince, take this, very shiny, very vibrating girl? The priest slurred, his words melting into one another. To be your favorite lifelong headache? I do, Long Yang said firmly. He reached across the moat and took her gloved hands. He felt the familiar tingle, the ghost of an itch, but he stood his ground. He was the sausage prince, and he would not falter. And do you, flower girl, take this? Sausage prince, to be your giant, handsome pillow? I do. Ruomei shouted, shaking her bouquet with such unbridled joy that a massive cloud of purple pollen erupted from the lilies like a volcanic ash cloud. The purple mist drifted slowly over the front row of the audience. Thud. 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 The Minister of War, the Chief Justice, and 3 imperial concubines hit the floor in a synchronized, anesthetic faint, their snores echoing through the silent plaza. Oopsie, Ruomei whispered, her voice small behind the veil. Just keep going, Long Yang hissed, his heart pounding. Ignore the snoring. Finish the vows. I now pronounce you husband and ZZZZZ. The priest collapsed onto the altar, sound asleep and smiling at the sky. We're married. Ruomei squealed. In her excitement, she forgot the 10-foot rule. She forgot the vinegar moat. She forgot that Long Yang was a human being with a nervous system. She lunged forward to kiss her groom. Long Yang saw it coming in slow motion. He saw her veil fly back. He saw her lips, glowing with a special honey zest balm she'd made that morning using rare nectar, aiming directly for his face. A month ago, he would have dodged. A month ago, he would have fainted. But today, Long Yang leaned in. He met her halfway. The kiss was explosive. Not metaphorically, actually explosive. The honey zest balm on Ruomei's lips contained trace amounts of phosphorus from the mountain soil. When it came into contact with the static electricity built up in the silver-threaded veil, it reacted with the sleeping dragon pollen lingering in the air between them. Pop! A massive cloud of glittery, pink smoke enveloped the couple. When the smoke cleared, Long Yang and Ruomei were standing in a perfect circle of pink suit. Long Yang's imperial robes were singed at the edges, his lips were already starting to tingle, and his left eye was beginning to twitch in a way that suggested a mild neurological protest. Ruomei, he rasped, his voice sounding like he'd been gargling gravel. Yes, my husband, she asked, blinking innocently through the suit. I think I am going to need those green anti-swelling patches now. At least 3 of them. On my face. I have them right here in my sleeve, she cheered, pulling out a handful of sticky, peppermint-smelling leaves and slapping them directly onto his forehead and cheeks. The guests who were still conscious, mostly those in the back rows with the best charcoal filters, watched in awe as the 9th prince, the god of war, stood at his own wedding with 3 large leaves stuck to his face like a botanical mask and a wife who was currently trying to use her wedding veil to catch a butterfly that had been attracted by the pink smoke. "It is beautiful," the old emperor whispered, peering through his protective lead-glass goggles. "The most entertaining wedding in 300 years. Someone bring more vinegar and wake up the minister of war. We have a banquet to survive." In the corner of the plaza, a grey-clad figure watched with bitter eyes. Su Leian, now a 4th-class commoner, had been forced to help set up the chairs for the ceremony. She had hoped for a disaster, a real one. Instead, she saw a prince who was so devoted to a poisonous woman that he was willing to stand at the altar covered in soot and leaves. "They're both insane," Su Leian muttered, her voice trembling. "He chose a jellyfish over a jewel." Commoner Su, a guard, barked, pointing at a pile of discarded charcoal veils. "Stop staring at the royalty and start gathering the laundry. You have 300 silk veils to wash by sunrise, or the Minister of Rights will have your remaining hairpins." Su Leian bit her lip, her pride shattering into 1,000 pieces. She looked at the happy, soot-covered couple, and then at the mountain of dirty laundry. Her downfall was complete. She was no longer a rival, she was a servant of the Sausage Prince legend. As the wedding procession began to move toward the palace, Ruomei skipped alongside Long Yang, her hand tucked into his singed sleeve. Husband, are you happy?" Long Yang looked at her through the gaps in his peppermint leaf patches. His face itched, his robes were ruined, and his guests were mostly unconscious. He looked at the horizon, where his new life awaited, a life of chaos, chemicals, and the woman who had somehow made his cold heart bloom. He whispered. "I am the happiest, most allergic man in the world." The honeymoon was intended to be a quiet, tactical retreat to the fragrant summer palace, a secluded imperial estate nestled in the misty Chishya Mountains. Long Yang had hand-selected this location for 2 very specific, non-romantic reasons. First, it was far from the prying eyes of the imperial court's gossip-mongers. Second, the palace was built over natural hot springs that contained high levels of sulfur and mineral salts, natural neutralizers for several of Ruomei's more volatile gifted toxins. "Peace," Long Yang sighed, reclining on a bamboo lounger in the inner courtyard. His face was clear of hives, and he had even managed to go 3 hours without wearing his fishbladder gloves. "For the first time since the border, I can hear the mountain birds without wondering if their song is a side effect of a giggling gill mushroom." "Husband, look what I found in the storage pantry." Ruomei burst into the courtyard, her silk robes fluttering like the wings of a chaotic butterfly. She was holding a jar of what looked like shimmering, translucent violet jelly. The previous owners left behind a jar of moonlight honey. "It's supposed to be an aphrodisiac, but I read in a scroll that it makes a wonderful hair conditioner for men with military stiff hair." Long Yang didn't even open his eyes. He had learned that visual confirmation of her experiments only increased his heart rate. "Ruomei, put the jar down. We discussed the honeymoon rules. Rule number 1, no experimenting on the prince. Rule number 2, no conditioners that glow in the dark." "But your hair is so coarse, Sausage Prince. It needs the moisture of the moon." Before he could leap from the lounger, she had dipped her fingers into the jar. Suddenly, she let out a small, surprised "oh." Long Yang opened one eye. Ruomei was frozen in place. Her fingers were stuck to the rim of the jar, and her feet seemed to be vibrating against the stone tiles. "Husband, I think I misread the label. This isn't moonlight honey. It's magnetic mountain sap. My father used it to find iron ore in the deep caves. Why am I sticking to the floor?" Long Yang bolted upright. "Magnetic sap. Ruomei, don't move." As she waved her hands in panic, the metal tea set on the low table began to rattle violently. Slowly at first, then with terrifying speed, the iron teapot slid across the table and flew through the air, clanging directly onto Ruomei's chest and sticking there like a limpet. "I'm a magnet," she squealed as a set of silver spoons followed the teapot, flying from the tray and sticking to her arms and shoulders. "Stay back," Long Yang shouted, but as he stepped toward her to help, the brass buttons on his own imperial robe began to groan, pulling toward her with an invisible, irresistible force. "Ruomei, stop waving. You're creating a gravitational field." "I can't help it." My blood is 10% iron because of those supplements my father gave me to cure my anemia. It was too late. The magnetic pull was a physical command. Long Yang was yanked forward, his heavy iron belt buckle slamming into the iron teapot on her chest with a loud, metallic thwack. They were stuck together, chest to chest, a tangled mess of silk robes, iron teapots, silver cutlery, and one very confused prince. Well, Ruomei whispered, her nose inches from his. This is certainly the most attracted to me you've ever been. It's very romantic. I am literally pinned to you by a kitchen appliance, Ruomei, Long Yang groaned, his face flushing. And your hair is currently attracting the bronze wind chimes from the balcony. While the couple was busy trying to demagnetize themselves with a bucket of salt water and a wooden spatula, a dark shadow appeared at the palace gates. Su Lian had not accepted her fate. Despite being stripped of her rank and sentenced to labor, she had used her family's last hidden cache of gold to hire a group of rogue mercenaries. She was no longer interested in marriage or status. She was driven by a jagged, obsessive need for revenge. She wanted to kidnap Ruomei, the source of her misery, and sell her to a rival kingdom as a living weapon. Find them, Su Lian hissed to her men, her face hidden behind a commoner's veil. The prince is likely incapacitated by one of her disasters anyway. He's weak for her. Strike hard and fast. The mercenaries crept into the courtyard, swords drawn. They expected to find a prince and his bride in a moment of romantic vulnerability. Instead, they found Long Yang and Ruomei stuck together like a human katamari, covered in spoons, and currently rolling around on the stone floor trying to reach a bowl of neutralizing vinegar. What in the name of the ancestors is that? The lead mercenary whispered, staring at the metallic ball of royalty. It's a secret defensive formation, another shouted, stepping back. Look at the glowing spoons. It's a trick. It's not a trick. Su Lian screamed, stepping out from the shadows. They're just idiots. They're stuck. Kill the prince and take the girl. Long Yang's military instincts, honed on 100 battlefields, overrode his embarrassment. Even though his belt was fused to the iron teapot on Ruomei's waist, he managed to grab a silver tray that was magnetically stuck to her left shoulder. Ruomei! Long Yang shouted, his voice regaining its general's authority. Lean left. We're going to use the magnetic turtle maneuver. Understood, sausage prince. Ruomei leaned back with all her might, and because of the magnetic sap, she acted as a pivot point. Long Yang swung his body around her, and the silver tray, acting as a circular shield, deflected a volley of throwing stars launched by the mercenaries. The stars didn't just bounce off, they were sucked into the tray and stuck there, neutralized. Give me your pouch. Long Yang commanded. Ruomei reached into her sleeve and pulled out a handful of peppersmoke pearls. Here. But careful, don't drop them near my nose. Long Yang threw the pearls at the feet of the charging men. Crack. A cloud of blinding, spicy red smoke filled the courtyard. The mercenaries began to sneeze and cough uncontrollably, their eyes streaming with tears as the concentrated capsaicin hit their lungs. My eyes. It's like being punched by 1,000 onions, one wailed. In the chaos, Su Lian lunged at Ruomei with a hidden dagger. You ruined my life, you brainless brat. If I can't be a princess, you won't be a bride. Ruomei, still stuck to Long Yang, couldn't dodge. But as Su Lian's steel blade came close, the magnetic sap took over. The dagger was ripped from Su Lian's hand by the invisible force and flew straight toward Ruomei, but instead of stabbing her, it hit the iron teapot still stuck to her chest with a harmless, metallic clink. Master, she gave me a gift. Ruomei cheered. Long Yang used the momentum to sweep Su Lian's legs out from under her. As she fell, the magnetic pull from Ruomei's mountain sap yanked Su Lian's heavy, stolen gold hairpins right out of her head. Her elaborate, fake hairstyle collapsed into a tangled mess of frizz and fury. My hair. Su Lian wailed, clutching her head. You've ruined my crowning glory. Your glory was built on lies and stolen silk, Su Lian, Long Yang rasped, pinning her down with a silver platter that was still magnetically attached to his forearm. Foam. Guards. To the summer palace. The manor guards, who had been hiding in the kitchen, waiting for the all-clear from Ruomei's latest accident, rushed in to arrest the blinded mercenaries and a sobbing, hairless Su Lian. An hour later, The magnetic sap had finally been neutralized by a specialized saltwater soak Ruomei found in her emergency recovery kit. Long Yang and Ruomei sat on the edge of the hot spring, finally free of iron teapots and silver cutlery. Ruomei, Long Yang said, looking at his singed belt. You realize that you just defeated an entire squad of professional assassins while being physically fused to a kitchen appliance. Technically, the teapot did the heavy lifting, she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. Long Yang noticed that his skin felt perfectly fine. No itching. No swelling. He was almost entirely immune. But I think we make a great team. You're the sword, and I'm the sticky stuff that keeps the sword from getting lost. Long Yang looked at her. Her face was smudged with soot, her hair was a disaster, and she currently smelled like a mixture of chili peppers and sulfur. And yet, he had never felt more at peace. Feng, Long Yang called out as the lieutenant approached. What is the status of the prisoner? Su Lian has been handed over to the Imperial Prefecture, General. Given that she hired mercenaries to attack royalty, the Emperor has signed her final decree. She is no longer just a commoner, she has been sentenced to permanent labor in the Imperial laundry. She will spend the rest of her days scrubbing the very silks she once tried to steal. Long Yang nodded. A fitting end. She wanted to be close to power, now she will be close to its dirty laundry. He turned back to Ruomei. Now, my wife. We have 4 days of honeymoon left. I want you to promise me, no honey, no sap, and no magnetic minerals. I promise, Sausage Prince. Ruomei beamed. But I did find some glimmer berries in the garden that make your skin turn. No berries. Long Yang roared, but he was smiling. He pulled her into a hug, a real one, without gloves, without moats, and without fear. The god of war had finally found a battle he didn't mind losing every single day. 3 months had passed since the magnetic honeymoon, and the imperial capital had settled into a new, albeit twitchy, status quo. The 9th Prince's manor had become a place of legend. The local citizens had even developed an informal early warning system. If the manor's bells rang 3 times, it meant Bai Ruomei was gardening, 5 times meant she was experimenting with new spices, and if the bells themselves began to glow or melt, it meant she had discovered a new species of mountain fungus. Long Yang, now serving as the Emperor's most trusted advisor, had undergone a total transformation. He no longer wore his fish bladder gloves or carried a vinegar spray. His Ruomei resistance was now a marvel of human biology. He could sit in a room filled with her lavender lava perfume, which smelled like a volcanic eruption in a flower shop, and not even clear his throat. He was the first man in history to be physically forged by a ditzy poisoner. However, the peace of the Great Long Dynasty was suddenly threatened. The Northern Khan, still harboring a grudge over the kissing incident at the border years prior, had arrived in the capital with his fiercest warriors. The Khan was a man of iron and ice who valued absolute dignity above all else. He had heard rumors that the god of war had married a jellyfish spirit who used biological weapons, and he had come to challenge Long Yang to a trial of the 5 senses to prove the dynasty hadn't turned soft. General, Feng reported, his voice tight with anxiety. The Khan has arrived. He says if you cannot best him in the trials, he will restart the border war. And he has specifically requested that your explosive consort be kept under lock and key. He calls her the Pink Plague. Long Yang looked at Ruomei, who was currently trying to teach the manor's guard dogs how to bark in harmony using musical bone marrow snacks. The Khan wants her away? Long Yang asked, a sharp, knowing glint in his eyes. That is a wise request. But unfortunately for him, Ruomei doesn't follow requests. Ruomei, my love, stay in the inner courtyard. Do not come to the great hall. Do not bring tea. Do not even think about a bubbling cauldron. Ruomei pouted, her cinnabar glow shimmering with disappointment. But husband, I heard the Khan has a very stiff neck from riding horses. I made a lightning liniment that would fix him in seconds. It's made from electric eels, ginger, and a pinch of dragonscale dust. Ruomei, Long Yang said, pulling her into a hug completely hive-free. If you put electric eel ginger on the Khan's neck, we will be at war before the first course is served. Stay. Here. Okay, she whispered, hiding a small vial behind her back. I promise. The trial of the 5 senses was held in the Imperial Great Hall. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The first 4 trials, sight, archery, sound, war drums, touch, wrestling, and taste, drinking high-proof grain liquor, had ended in a dead heat. Long Yang was a wall of stone, the Khan was a mountain of ice. "You are strong, ninth prince," the Khan grunted, his face flushed from the liquor. "But the final trial is the trial of smell. In our northern lands, we have the frozen death flower. Its scent is so heavy it can knock a bear unconscious. Only a true leader with the strongest constitution can withstand its fragrance for 1 hour without flinching." A servant brought out a black iron box. When the lid was opened, a sickly sweet, heavy grey vapor spilled out. The scent was like rotting lilies mixed with musk and ancient dust. It was a fragrance that didn't just hit the nose, it hit the brain, inducing a heavy, suffocating lethargy. Long Yang felt his head swim. His vision began to blur. Across the table, the Khan was also beginning to pale, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. The entire hall was falling into a forced, poisonous sleep. But then, a familiar, chaotic scent began to drift into the hall from the southern vents. It was the scent of burning hair? No, it was wet dog. Mixed with peaches. And something that smelled like a thunderstorm in a bucket of vinegar. "Master, I brought the fans. The air in here is so dusty, I thought you might need a refresh." Ruomei burst through the doors, ignoring the guards. She was followed by 10 servants carrying massive silk fans. Behind them was a giant brass brazier on wheels, filled with a bubbling, neon-purple sludge that was releasing thick, energetic clouds of gas. "Ruomei." Long Yang gasped, his eyes watering from the sudden chemical war in the air. "I told you to stay away." "I didn't enter the Great Hall," she shouted over the bubbling sludge. "Technically, I am standing on the decorative threshold, which is part of the garden, and I couldn't let you breathe that smelly grey box. It's very bad for your pores." She grabbed a fan and began to waft the purple sludge vapor toward the table with the strength of a gale-force wind. "Behold," Ruomei announced to the horrified Khan. "My latest masterpiece, the breath of the 5 elements. It contains skunkroot, peppermint fire, and the highly concentrated essence of a very, very angry badger." The purple vapor hit the grey frozen death vapor mid-air. The 2 gases didn't mix, they fought. It was a visible battle of fumes. The grey gas tried to induce sleep, but the purple gas, the badger essence, induced a sudden, violent urge to be incredibly awake and physically active. "What is this?" the Khan roared, standing up and immediately sneezing so hard his heavy fur hat flew across the room and landed in a tureen of soup. "Achoo. It feels like my brain is being scrubbed with a wire brush. Achoo. It's a cleanser." Ruomei cheered, fanning harder. "Keep breathing. It gets better once the badger essence starts to tingle your toes." The northern warriors began to sneeze in a rhythmic, thunderous chorus. They weren't falling asleep anymore, they were jumping up and down, their eyes watering as the peppermint fire cleared their sinuses with the subtlety of a lightning strike. Long Yang, who had spent months breathing Ruomei's experiments, was the only person in the room who remained perfectly still. He watched as the northern Khan, the terror of the steppes, fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he inhaled the scent of minty skunk. "Stop," the Khan wheezed, waving a white silk handkerchief. I yield to the purple smoke. The Great Long Dynasty is not soft. Any nation that can survive a woman who brews badger essence is a nation of demons and immortals. We will sign the peace treaty. Just put the fire out before my nose falls off." Ruomei immediately dumped a bucket of neutralizing nectar, which smelled like wet ham, into the brazier. The purple smoke vanished, leaving the hall in a damp, stinky, but very peaceful silence. Long Yang stood up, straightened his singe-free robes, and looked at the shivering Khan. "Do we have an agreement, Khan? Or shall my wife bring out the electric eel liniment for your stiff neck?" "No," the Khan screamed, scrambling backward. "No liniment. No badgers. We sign now. I want to go back to the north, where the only thing that tries to kill me is a simple blizzard." Later that night, the treaty was signed in record time. The northern Khan fled the capital so quickly he forgot 3 of his favorite horses and his ceremonial sword. Long Yang and Ruomei sat on the roof of their manor, watching the stars. The sausage prince was now the hero of the stinky piece. Ruomei, Longyang said, his voice surprisingly soft. He reached out and tucked a stray hair behind her ear. No gloves. No rash. Total victory. You realized that you just dismantled a military invasion using a bucket of badger essence and a few silk fans? I just didn't want you to be sleepy, husband, she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. You work so hard. You shouldn't have to deal with frozen death on an empty stomach. Ruomei, Longyang said, pulling her closer. You are the most dangerous woman in the empire. And I am the luckiest man. Because as long as I am with you, I will never have to worry about a quiet, boring life. Does that mean I can try to make sparkling rice for breakfast tomorrow? She asked, her eyes sparkling with a new, terrifying idea. Longyang looked at the moon and let out a long, happy sigh. Ask me when our story is written into the history books, my love. For now, just let me enjoy the smell of wet ham and peace. 5 years had passed since the Great Sneeze of the North, and the Great Long Dynasty had entered an era of unprecedented prosperity. This was largely because no foreign army dared to set foot within 10 miles of a border guarded by the 9th prince's wife. The mere sight of a pink silk fan was now enough to make a seasoned cavalryman break out in a nervous sweat. Longyang sat in the imperial garden, now serving as the emperor's chief advisor. He looked younger than he had a decade ago, though he still carried a small vial of high-potency antihistamine in his silk belt, not because he needed it, but as a nostalgic memento of the days when his lips were the size of sausages. He was now known throughout the land as the immune emperor, the only man who could walk through a cloud of toxic spores and come out with perfectly styled hair. General. Father. Look at my new friend. A small, energetic 5-year-old boy named Long Outien came sprinting across the grass. He was the perfect, chaotic blend of his parents. He had his father's sharp, handsome features and his mother's terrifyingly creative relationship with chemistry. In his hand, he held a frog that was glowing a bright, neon purple. Outien, Longyang said, catching the boy in a hug, no gloves required. Why is that frog purple? And why is it humming? Mother said the frogs looked sad because they weren't colorful enough. Outien chirped. So we gave them a bath in electric plum juice. Now they can jump twice as high and they hum the imperial anthem when it rains. Longyang looked toward the palace pond, where 50 purple frogs were currently humming a low, vibrating tune. He sighed, a genuine smile tugging at his mouth. Go return the happy frogs to the pond, Outien. And tell your mother the emperor is coming for tea. Remind her, ordinary tea. Su Leian, after her multiple failed attempts at kidnapping and sabotage, had found her true, ultimate calling. Under the strict supervision of the imperial guards, she had been sentenced to permanent community labor in the imperial laundry. It turned out her obsessive need for perfection and her sharp personality made her the most feared and efficient laundress in the history of the empire. No servant dared leave a stain when Su Leian was around to scold the fabric into submission. She had even stopped drawing her eyebrows unevenly, finding that the steam from the washtubs kept them perfectly natural. The old emperor had retired to a quiet life of watching the Ruomei show from his balcony. Every time a green cloud of smoke or a magnetic pulse emanated from the 9th prince's manor, he would chuckle and order another plate of dumplings. Life used to be so predictable, he would say to his eunuchs. Now, I wake up every morning wondering if gravity is still a suggestion or a rule. It keeps my heart young. As for the 100 Poison Valley, Ruomei's father had become the empire's chief physician. He had successfully turned Ruomei's accidents into medical miracles. The toad lily juice was now the leading treatment for skin rashes, and the ghost fire peppers were used in microdoses to cure chronic fatigue. Bai Ruomei walked out onto the pavilion, carrying a tray of tea. She looked radiant, her peach blossom skin as beautiful and, to everyone but Longyang, as dangerous as ever. Husband, she said, setting the tea down. I made a special blend today. I call it Harmony of the Soul. I promise, it has no badgers, no magnets, and no truth serum. It's just tea. Longyang looked at the tea. It was a suspicious shade of shimmering, swirling silver. Ruomei, he said, taking her hand and kissing her palm, a move that would have killed him 5 years ago. Why is it silver? Oh, that's just the stardust pollen. It makes your breath smell like jasmine for 3 weeks. I thought it would be nice for the diplomatic summit tomorrow. Long Yang picked up the cup. He looked at his wife, the woman who had poisoned him, disgraced him, accidentally saved him, and ultimately made his cold heart bloom. He realized that the loose ends of his life hadn't been tied into a neat bow, they had been woven into a wild, colorful, and slightly toxic tapestry. To the sausage prince and the jellybrain, Long Yang toasted, clinking his cup against hers. To us. Ruomei cheered, taking a big gulp. A second later, Ruomei's hair began to float upward, standing straight out from her head like a silver halo. She began to drift a few inches off her seat. Master, why is the ground getting smaller? The stardust pollen has a slight levitation side effect, doesn't it? Long Yang asked, calmly reaching out to grab her silk sash so she wouldn't float away. Only if you drink it too fast, she giggled, paddling the air with her hands. Grab my hand, husband. Let's go see the sunset from the roof. Long Yang stood up, held his floating wife close, and looked out over the peaceful empire. It wasn't a perfect life, and it certainly wasn't a quiet one, but it was theirs. I guess the sausage prince really did find his perfect match. But tell us, if you were Long Yang, would you have survived the first encounter, or would you have run for the hills? Let us know your favorite Ruomei disaster in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey, give us a like and subscribe to Lotus Tale Studios for more hilarious stories from the Imperial Court. We'll see you in the next story.